Hey guys, Bigfooter Gary here. I've got the trailer all popped up and ready to go. Cleaned it out yesterday, aired it out. This weekend, I'm gonna head into Quebec. We're gonna go up to Tom's camp, and there's a lot of four-wheeler trails up there. I wanna do some scouting, maybe some droning. So we're gonna do an outdoor adventure up there for the channel. Today, I wanna do something new. So we have done, I don't know, 240 some episodes of my Bigfoot story, which is, you know, my original story going back to the original place, and then all of the outings that Gage and I do. And we're gonna start a new series on this channel, Your Bigfoot Story. Okay, so I had a really great story sent to me here from a guy in Oregon, and I'm gonna take Gage up into the woods here for a little bit of a hike because he needs some exercise. We'll find a good spot, and I wanna tell you guys this account. We want to, I mean, it seems credible to me. I can't tell you guys what's real and what's not real. All I can tell you is what they send me. And I don't even want to be the guy who says, I'm not going to share that story on my channel because it's just too unbelievable or whatever. Not that this story is. There's nothing unbelievable about this particular story. But I have had a few that people have sent me. And you know what? I don't think I want to be the guy to judge that, right? Because what do we know? I've seen orange flying orbs, for heaven's sake. Like, you know, lots of people would look at me and say, you're crazy. I've seen them with my own eyes. My brother saw them. So I don't want to be the guy to make judgment calls on stories that you guys send me. I just want to share them. I think it's fun. And no, we're not going to do it every week. But, you know, once in a while, I will share the stories you guys send. True accounts is what I'm after. If you guys have a true account, something that happened, you know, Bigfoot related, by all means, send it to me and we'll eventually share it on the channel. Let's do this. So I also want to remind you guys to have patience with the new channel because yes, I'm migrating all the old Bigfoot stuff over. So a lot of you have seen those episodes. There is new stuff coming, obviously. We put up a new video the other night. And this one, I'm still running Unfrequented World, so I'm still making episodes for that channel. And so you just have to have patience, right? I can't get out every day and make Bigfoot videos. So I've had a couple guys comment, ouch, deer fly biting me on the arm. Ah, I got him. I had a guy actually comment to me, I'm taking back my sub because this is all old crap. Well, you know what? Sorry. I do what I can do. I'm only human. And you guys were told we're moving all the old stuff over there. There will be new stuff, but obviously it takes time. This weekend we're going to head up to Tom's camp and do some exploring, night investigation, whatever we end up doing up there. That takes a whole weekend to do that, right? So you got to give me time. That's all I can say. And as to that one guy, see you later. Take back your sub. I don't care. Wow. I can't believe how bad the bugs are right now. I thought being kind of cool in the morning I'd be all right, but apparently not. They're terrible. Anyway, this series I'm gonna call Your Bigfoot Stories. These are the things you guys send us, and I think it's a cool part of the channel. There can be information, little tidbits of information that we could all learn, and maybe over time we say, you know, enough similarities that we can start to compile things that we can assume are facts about Bigfoot, but we still don't know. Hey Bigfooter Gary, I've really been meaning to send you this story for a while now. I have watched all 200 and some of your videos, as I am a true honest believer. Nope, scratch that. A knower that this creature exists. I feel you run an honest channel, and the experience you had all those years ago has many of the same qualities that my own experience had roughly 30 years ago. Let me begin by saying that I grew up in the great state of Oregon, a natural kid's dream playground. We grew up hunting, fishing, and camping. much the same as you did in your own backwoods. I have to admit that when I hear Ontario, Canada, I think northern neighbors. But when I did some research and looked at the Google Maps, you really are a straight run east of us. Anyway, we grew up country, and I can relate not only to your Bigfoot videos, but your hunting videos as well. I will say some of our bucks are world class, and boa hunting has been a passion of mine for many years. My father, 2 brothers, and I are avid hikers as well. My father always used to take us up into the mountains for weekend trips, and camping and fishing was a major part of growing up in our household. I will remember this season forever and could not possibly forget the date if I tried. The year was 1992. My father had promised to take all 3 of us boys up into the mountains east of the Olympic National Forest as a reward for good grades and passing all of our school classes. I was the middle child and was 16 at the time. My older brother Mike was 18 and had just gotten a summer job working at a local Christian camp, and for the first time in our family history, he decided he would not be making the annual late summer camping trip as he was trying to save for college and had a new girlfriend, etc. You know the drill. Girls are better company than your father and brothers on a week-long slog through the mountains. My younger brother Bill and I would be the only 2 accompanying my father on this trip. I think my dad was a little melancholy about the whole thing, realizing that times were changing. He was not the young man he used to be, and now his oldest son would not be joining him on this annual trip. I think it hit him that he really didn't have too many years left to spend up in the mountains with his boys. My mother never joined us on this particular trip as it was a boys' week, something we all spent weeks planning and pining for. Mom would help us prepare for the journey and make sure we didn't forget anything, filling our packs with extra socks, but I think she rather enjoyed a quiet week alone. This trip was going to be about cutthroat trout. The Skoskomish River has a variety of trout and salmon species, but Dad always had a love affair with the cutthroat. If any of you know the area, it is rugged, and there were not a lot of access points to the upper river. My father never liked camping in campgrounds or around others. He preferred to be in nature and away from most other humans when possible on these trips. Of course, we often saw other anglers on the river, but most of them were happy to fish alone and keep to themselves as well. My point is, from the time we had boots on the ground, it was a half-day's hike to a suitable location upriver before my father would even consider making camp. I was young and fairly strong, big for my age, 6 foot, and I could carry a good load. My younger brother Bill was 15 and not far behind. Between the 3 of us, we carried a canvas tent, fishing supplies, and enough food for the better part of the week. My father was a forester and knew the woods better than most. We never worried about eating. We would probably end up packing most of our dry goods back out, as many of our meals this week would consist of fish and wild forage. We arrived at the river mid-morning, and all was pretty smooth as we loaded our packs and gear and started up the trailhead. The river trails were wide and well used. Hiking was easy. Down at the lake end, we saw a few other guys fishing, and my father talked with them for a few minutes, getting a feel for the bite. The next few hours were not an easy hike, but an enjoyable one. You had to be in good physical shape, and even then, after a 4-hour climb, you would end up tired. The North Fork of the river was my dad's favorite. Here the trout were plentiful and the anglers few and far between. My father called to stop and camp was quickly set up. We all knew our roles: fire pit, tent, collect wood, and catch lunch. My brother, being the youngest, was given the task of heading down to the river to see if he could catch a couple of panfish for lunch, and so off he went. I helped my father set up the canvas tent. Yes, you heard that correct, an actual canvas tent. My father always swore by canvas, and yes, we carried it in. My father probably had 50 pounds of tent alone. He was in excellent shape back in those days. I collected rocks for our fire pit and then some wood. By that time, my brother was coming back up the trail with a stringer and 2 nice-sized trout. As my brother made his way into camp and set the fish down, he turned to my father and said something strange. "We're not alone here, Dad." My father looked up from lighting the fire and asked what my brother meant. Well, I saw a man down at the river just off in the woods. I thought he was walking the trail on the far side of the river, but he was there a long time. He never came down to the river. I never did see him come out of the bush. My father didn't look too concerned and asked my brother where the man went, upstream or down. My brother replied that he was not sure. He had started fishing and lost track of where the figure had gone. My father gave us both a general warning to pay attention to our surroundings and proceeded to cook the fish. Nothing more was said on the matter, and we all wrote it off as nothing. Well, at least I did. It wasn't until later that afternoon, when we had all grabbed our rods and headed down to the river, that my brother made mention of the stranger to me again. My dad always liked his own space when fishing, and my brother and I had always been told to fish together growing up, as the river could be dangerous. My father walked the 75 yards to the river's edge and told us he was going to fish from there down to the next bend in the river, and that we should be back at camp no later than 7 p.m. My brother and I would walk a quarter mile upriver and then fish back down to camp. It was on this hike that my brother turned to me and said, "You know, I didn't tell Dad, but something about that guy in the woods earlier was not right. He was just watching me, and I kind of had a bad feeling about it. I was going to come back to camp and get you, but when I looked up, he was gone, and I just thought you should know." Well, I don't know if it was my brother's tone or the fact that we were alone in the woods, probably miles from anyone, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I really became aware of the thick woods around me, and the entire walk up that trail I could feel eyes on me. We were an outdoor family and had spent many hours in the woods. This was an unusual feeling for me. Once we started fishing our way back downriver, I kind of got lost in the angling and began to enjoy the evening. We caught fish after fish. We didn't bother keeping any as we knew there would be lots more. My brother had a Kodak camera he always carried, and we took a lot of great photos that night. Some beautiful fish. It wasn't until we hit the edge of the river back down in front of our camp that the sixth sense of mine kicked back in. On the far side of the river, a loud crack made me jump. At first I thought it was my dad cutting firewood for our fire that night. My brother was standing in the river releasing a fish. I don't think he heard it. However, the next crack seemed even louder to me and my brother instantly looked up into the woods. That was not the sound of an axe biting into dead wood. It was loud and echoed across the river. My brother looked at me, eyes wide, and quickly joined me up on the bank. Both of us stood there looking into the woods, trying to see who or what was making that noise. It was at that time that my father came down the trail behind us, and we both breathed a sigh of relief. At first my father didn't say anything. He saw us standing there, and he himself scanned the far side of the river. I could tell from the look on his face he had heard what we had heard. After a few moments, he looked down at us and asked how the fishing was. We all turned and made our way back to camp as if nothing had happened. I could feel every hair on my neck standing to attention as I made my way up the trail, and it took everything in me to not turn around. We ate dinner that night around the fire and just enjoyed the sounds of nature and the river. My father told us about a few great spots down the river to try in the morning, and that we should plan on doing some foraging in the afternoon. One more day here fishing and we could switch spots. He would go upstream and Bill and I could go downstream in the morning. The stars eventually came out, and the exhaustion of the day took us, as it had been a very physical trip. It was probably before 10 o'clock that night, but we all decided it was time for bed. I don't know what it was that woke me that night. Either the urge to urinate or my brother rolling over and hitting me. Something woke me. And as I opened my eyes, contemplating whether to get up or not and go to the bathroom, my heart skipped a beat. The canvas tent beside my head suddenly moved, as if pushed from the outside. Instantly I stopped breathing and lay in my bedroll, not moving a muscle. I had heard nothing, just the tent moving. I was almost ready to write it off as my imagination when the tent bulged in for a second time. I could hear the canvas scratch as something moved down the side of the tent. I kicked my brother as best I could from inside my bedding. He rolled over but did not wake up. I lay there breathing heavy, too scared to move. I didn't want to wake my father, but something was out there. Within a couple of minutes, I heard my dad sit up. I guess he could see that I was awake because he asked me what was wrong. I quickly told him that something was out there and had brushed up against the tent. My father immediately got up and went to his pack. There he pulled out his M1911 Colt. My father, having worked in the bush most of his life, always carried a weapon. I believe that gun had been his father's. .45 caliber, tried, tested, and true. Flashlight and gun in hand, my father exited the tent without a word. I could hear him moving about the camp and could see the flashlight bounce around as he searched for whatever was out there. Our food had been stored about 40 yards away, pulled up in a white oak, and I could hear my father going down the trail to check on it. Within minutes he was back. Nothing out there now, boys. It might have been a bear though, and we need to be mindful. I don't think my brother was even awake, though my dad was talking to both of us. The gun was put away and the flashlight turned off. My father's gentle snoring soon filled the tent again. I lay awake for hours. Eventually, at some point, before morning, I drifted off. I never did leave the tent to urinate. The next morning there was a mist coming off the river as we got up and had breakfast and prepared for our morning fish. Salt pork comes to mind when I think of that morning. After all these years, I can remember what we had for breakfast. Salt pork and beans, warmed on the fire. My dad asked if we wanted to fish together and all go upstream. Bill and I both knew he would enjoy the fishing alone, and both politely declined. We gathered our gear and made our way down the trail to the river. My father glanced back over his shoulder as he started up the north trail. I could tell he wanted to say something, but he just wished us good luck. The water was cold, and my brother and I were into the fish almost immediately. I asked my brother as we made our way downstream if he had heard the commotion in the tent the night before. He said no, that he had heard me get up to go to the bathroom, but that was it. I knew then that he had slept through the whole thing. The sun was just getting high enough to shoot through the trees and hit the river. Mist was rising off the water, and I remember it being very beautiful. We had made our way a couple 100 yards downstream, and Bill was in front of me. The first big bend in the river was just in front of us, and the river made a hard left twist. I hit a small pool on the far side of the river and hooked a nice trout. My brother continued to walk down the river in front of me. By the time I got the trout landed and unhooked, Bill was 50 yards in front of me. I looked up from my release and noticed that Bill was standing with his rod at his side, not moving, looking downriver. I began to make my way towards him, keeping my eyes on the slippery rocks underfoot. As I reached my brother, I put my hand on his shoulder. He jumped so hard, it startled me, and I almost fell back into the river. Turning, Bill looked at me with terror in his eyes. He didn't say anything. I looked downriver and saw nothing. I looked back at Bill, and he slowly turned his gaze away from me and back to the water. It was then that I saw it. It was right there, standing in the mist at the edge of the river, not moving. A black figure covered in hair, with one arm out hanging onto the bank. I could see wet hair shining in the morning sun, thick muscles and what might have been boobs. This figure was standing on two legs and had a very human look about it. I was dumbfounded. My brain could not figure out what I was looking at. If I could say anything about this thing, it looked like an Olympic gold medal wrestler. 6 feet, give or take, and probably between 300 to 400 pounds. As I stood there confused, panic rising, this thing actually turned and walked very quickly across the river. Now, I know most folks will tell you these things are elusive and you would think it would have just climbed the riverbank beside it and disappeared. But it didn't. It very quickly walked across the river, 25 feet, stepping up onto the rocks on the far side of the river, keeping its eyes on us the whole time. As it reached the far side of the river and turned to face us full on, a roaring blast erupted behind my brother and I. Both of us dropped low to the water by instinct. I turned to see my father standing in the water behind us with a look on his face I had never seen before. He had his pistol out, pointing it in the air, and he immediately fired a second shot. I began to panic, thinking this thing was charging up the river, heading towards us. I turned and looked back to where the creature had been, but it was gone. My brother and I were now in full panic mode. My brother, running towards my father, slipped in the river and dropped his fishing rod. He got up and left the rod and continued running towards my father. I usually don't tell people that I ran, but in all honesty, I did. I stopped to grab my brother's pole and quickly made my way back to my dad. At that time, I never even questioned why my father was there. He just was, and I was grateful. We headed back to the camp and packed up immediately. We didn't talk about what had happened. Dad was all business. We left camp that morning and ended our trip right there. We went home. My mother was surprised to see us home early, and I'm sure my father eventually told her what happened. He told Bill and I that it would be better if we didn't mention this to other folks, and it would only bring trouble. We never questioned him, we just obeyed. Over the years, my brother and I have discussed what we saw many times that day. The only conclusion we can come to... Mosquito, sorry. The only conclusion we can come to is a Sasquatch. After the incident, my brother bemoaned the fact that he had a camera on him and never even thought to use it. We both remember the details pretty much the same, and after much research online and viewing the Patterson-Gimlin film, we both agree that is exactly what we saw all those years ago, a female Bigfoot. My brother agrees with me. It had breasts. It was female, whatever it was. It wasn't until many years later, as my father neared the end of his life, that he once again talked about that incident with Bill and I. I finally asked him what he was doing south of the camp that morning when he had planned on heading upriver. He told us that he had a bad feeling. He wasn't expecting anything like what he found when he made his way downriver, but it was a strong paternal instinct that we were in trouble. He said he was worried that one of us was going to drown. Whatever it was, it just goes to show that there is more to this world than we know. I will end this account here, Gary. I appreciate all that you do on your channel. I wanted to share my story with all of your viewers. It happened just as I have recounted, and want you to know that these things are real and out there. I don't know if I wish for you to have your own face-to-face encounter or not. It will change a man, and many have left the woods after their encounters, never to return to the forest they love. Keep doing what you do. We appreciate you. Dave in Oregon. Well, that's a pretty amazing story, guys. 3 witnesses, and you know, it's quite a bit what we usually hear, right? Back in the day, people didn't want to talk about that. If you saw something strange, you kept it to yourself. Nothing different here, right? Dad says we're not going to talk about it. The kids agree, they don't talk about it. I don't know if there was ever a formal report made, probably not, on that incident. I want to say thanks to Dave for sending it to me. And if you guys have a story or incident of your own, by all means, and you want me to share it, send it, and we're going to make that a part of this channel as the Your Bigfoot Story section. Thanks for watching, guys.